Eddie Chavez, Ruben Nava, and Jesse Romero. Jesus 911.
Jesus 911. Eddie and Jess were 10-8 today on another pandemic day. I'm reporting for duty. Jess, what about you?
I'm 10-8, Eddie, reporting for duty, sir. And what a beautiful thing, Eddie, that we have as Catholics. We have the hope of the resurrection, the hope of Jesus' mercy despite our being sinners and wretched. That's just something that it just brightens my day, regardless what's happening around the world. The fact that God's mercy is unending if we repent, and the fact that there's life after death because of the resurrection. I mean, everything else, Eddie, all I just say is bring it on.
Absolutely, Jess. I mean, we have to rejoice in that. I mean, what else is there, especially at this time, this time of pandemic? It's like as our parents taught us, just behave. Just as long as we do the right thing, we're going to be fine.
That's right. Yeah, Eddie. Let's jump into. Well, I just want to mention over the weekend, I think you had sent me this thing to watch on. It was called Out of the Shadow officially.
Yes,
it's two Hollywood stuntmen. And I recommend anybody who's listening to this program to watch that video, because Eddie and me, we're going to do a show on it. We'll prepare a show on it. It's called Out of the Shadows officially. It's two Hollywood stuntmen, Eddie. They talk about the dark side of Hollywood, things that I already knew, but they go into detail into the satanic underpinnings of Hollywood, the systemic child molestation that's found in Hollywood, and so. Anybody who's interested in spiritual warfare, if you want to see a good spiritual warfare documentary, I think these guys had a conversion to the Catholic faith. I know at least to Christianity, because there's some Bible verses that are quoted there. But I think they did a good job. What do you think, Eddie?
No, I think it's a great video, and I think it's something. It's about an hour and 15 minutes long, Jess. I think that people should try to watch that before we get into the show, because we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff that will go over our heads if we haven't seen that. And it's very interesting. I was watching it, so I think that's something we need to work on, Jess, to get more information on it. But it's jam packed. It's a jam packed video we need to watch.
Yeah, Eddie, I emailed 4 actor friends of mine that I'm pretty tight with, and I send them the documentary, and they send it back to me, and all 4 of them told me that documentary is spot on. This is exactly some of the things that I've seen in Hollywood and some of these parties, and you just kind of have to keep your head down and just stay under the radar. But they said that these stuntmen were very brave to do what they did, and that what they're depicting is completely accurate. And it was 4 different actors that I emailed, and they all responded to me.
Yeah, just I mean, different assignments in law enforcement. You get a little taste of certain things here and there. But when I was on the governor's protective detail, there was some parties that we'd shadow the governor at, and I'm talking about probably 3 different governors. The last one being Schwarzenegger that I worked. You see some things that you question. I mean, you don't have time to sit there and ponder it, but you do have a time to reflect on it later and say, what exactly was that? So, yeah, it's something that we're looking forward to. And so see that video, Out of the Shadows, official trailer, it may say, but Out of the Shadows, and see it. It's worth your time, and we'll go over it. Just later on in the show, we're going to talk about an interview that somebody did actually Church Militant did of Kevin Wells, who's a very renowned Catholic author. But right now we're going to talk about something else. We're going to talk about the secrets of the demonic, how this Vatican exorcist experiences the spiritual realm. And
Eddie, and I'm glad this is all happening. When we were younger. We didn't hear about this stuff in our 20s and our 30s about exorcism and stuff like this. Now it's kind of a common conversation. You can find that now prevalent in Catholic articles, and priests are talking about their experiences. Again, I think this is a good thing. Not to scare people. That's not the point. The point is to alert people, alert Catholics, warn people about the reality of the diabolical, the do's and don'ts of becoming diabolically afflicted. So I enjoy these articles that continue to come out where these exorcists are putting their ministry, they're exposing what they do, they're giving interviews. I think that's a good thing for all of us as lay Catholics, Eddie.
No, definitely, Jess. I mean, this, like you said, something that wasn't given much attention just, 30, 40 short years ago, Jess, when we were in school together. We never heard about it. And it's interesting that both of us come out of this really focusing in on this topic, being involved in it. So that it's really cool. And especially, Jess, I love this particular priest, Raphael Talmelli, who who uses a little holster for his crucifix.
Yeah, I'm
so
looking at
I
the
love
picture.
it. Yeah, that's going to appeal to law enforcement, Jess.
Well, let's start with the article then.
Sure. It starts like this. It says the Atlantic recently published a mini documentary about Vatican exorcist from the Vatican, Father Raphael Talmelli. The film goes inside of his life as an exorcist. He explains how he identifies evil, the common misconceptions regarding the demonic, and explains how encountering this side of the spiritual realm is not thrilling, but absolutely terrifying. So just here we have that distinction between Hollywood exorcisms, Hollywood spiritual warfare, and actual spiritual warfare. And so there's nothing thrilling about when you get into a serious case, and that's what they're talking about here.
Yeah, Eddie, I've also read from Malachi Martin and others. I think Father Gabriel Amorth, some other experienced exorcists. I've read that they've said that every time you go into one of these, into a solemn exorcism, they're saying it's like part of your life is taken from you. In other words, it's like you're giving part of your life in this session, and you feel like your life is like ebbing and flowing away.
Yeah.
I mean, these priests are stepping face to face with the devil or a demon or demons.
I think this is where the analogy to law enforcement comes, because unless you've been on the front lines, unless you've been at a scene where somebody has died or somebody dies and you're the last person they're looking at or they're talking with, you give up a little bit there. You're never quite the same afterwards, and I think that's
what it
never has
the point I'm getting at.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same application to other lines of work necessarily, but I know that, for example, The Exorcist, whenever you see somebody morph in front of you, you think, was that me? Was that what was going on there? And you give up a little bit of your peace of mind, but yet God's grace restores that. That's what it is.
Well, let's continue.
Okay, the day after my ordination, the bishop asked me to take on this role. I would have never expected that. Exorcist, just the day after his ordination.
Wow. Well, they saw something in this.
Yeah.
The bishop saw something in this
Yes.
priest, obviously. Again, they handpicked the priest they usually have a reputation amongst other priests for personal holiness and orthodoxy and just dedication to prayer and stuff. Yeah.
Right. He says, we have studied many things about evil and demons. But we often see people have totally misleading ideas, both about evil and demons, and frequently about the exorcist himself. I understood that my main mission was to get rid of the ignorance that permeates these themes. The first demon to oust was the general misinformation people fall into. A lot of folks are concerned about minor issues, illnesses, or mental disorders without realizing how the real demon's actions happen around us. It says, contra daimones, that's against demons, says it is key to understand that if a person is mentally ill, it would absolutely be illusory and detrimental to perform any exorcism. There is such a big misunderstanding in our world to mistake psychiatric issues with possessions and vice versa. To face a real demoniac is an awful experience. First of all, they are absolutely mentally sound and use their superior intelligence to hurt.
Let me mention one thing about that phrase.
Yes.
I've heard it said by several exorcists that the most inferior demon in the kingdom of darkness is about 1,000,000 times smarter than the most intelligent human being that's ever walked the face of the earth. So I think I made this analogy the other day. Think about like Albert Einstein and Cardinal Ratzinger. Put those brains together. The most inferior, weakest demon in the kingdom of darkness is a million times smarter than those minds put together. So that's just so you can just get a taste of what they're dealing with.
Justin, you have to realize whatever their ultimate goal is going to be so much higher, mentally than ours, intellectually than ours. You could see where they can have an upper hand, the demons, but you can also see where if we are conducting our life properly and we're staying in a state of grace, that they can help us in ways that we haven't imagined. So that's what I think the good part of this. It says, let's just say it's a terrible encounter. When it happens, it's a clash. There's a lot of wickedness with a trail of evil that follows you for a long time.
Yeah, that's the point that I was making earlier. That's what Father Malachi Martin says in Father Amorth. Yeah, that after one of these real serious encounters, it leaves a trail, and it follows the exorcist for a long time.
Right. Just
I was even I remember Father Ripperger told me that in one case, he said this person was possessed as a result of drug addiction, and he said when he did the exorcism after, he said he was intoxicated for hours. He goes, I've never been intoxicated in my life. He says, whatever intoxicating feeling he had, he goes, I felt the effects for hours after. He says, I had horrible vertigo after this exorcism.
Yep. Join us right after the break. Jesus 911, we're talking about exorcism.
Psalm 119 says, Your word is a lamp for my feet and a light to my path. According to St. John Paul II, being a Christian means saying yes to Jesus Christ. It consists in surrendering to the Word of God and relying on it, but also endeavoring to know better and better the profound meaning of this Word. May God grant that we always rely on His Word, read it often, and put it into practice.
How does the baby move in your tummy? How does the baby eat? Can the baby hear me? How did the baby get in there?
Wow, a pregnancy can sure generate a lot of questions. But what's important is that a baby is a baby, inside and out of the womb. Not just after birth, but 9 months before. At conception.
That's right. Every baby is a miracle. Hello, my name is Marianne Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org, or better yet, simply dial pound 250 on your cell phone and say the keyword pro-life. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
A baby's heart is beating 18 days from conception.
Pro-life across America, the Billboard people.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Jesus 911. If this call is not an emergency, dial 888-526-2151.
Soul Patrol, Jesus 911, Jess Romero, Eddie Chavez. We're on one of our favorite topics, Jess, which makes us probably a little odd, but exorcism.
It makes this program totally different from anything you hear on Catholic radio, Eddie.
Yeah, exactly. Jess, we're talking about a priest from the Vatican. His name is Raphael Talmelli, And we're just talking about how an exorcist, how exorcisms affect their life here. And you go ahead and take over. Just I lost my place here really quick.
Yeah. He says, my disgrace has been to find demoniac people in the church. Jesus, after all, found his first demoniac in the synagogue. So that's a powerful statement. I mean, there's a lot of these cases. You don't even have to go out to Hollywood or some brothel. You find them right in the church. It says here, now I don't know what this word means. I looked it up. It's a non-word. I think it's a typo. Exorcism means to recollate the world within the ratio, which is the reason for being all things, for all things around us and that exists within nature. It is not a law revealed by any religion. It is indeed a natural law. The problem is that people believe that to be possessed by the devil is to be thunderstruck while everything is just fine. But according to the gospel, the reality is very different. When Jesus meets the man possessed by a demon, it is clearly written, which means inside an evil spirit, that means that it is actually the man himself that entered the evil spirit and not the other way around. So what the writer here is saying in the article is that in the Gospels, you find a lot of people, they end up, as a result of their sinful lifestyle, they end up basically inviting the demon instead of the demon poking around and going after them. They're opening doors to the diabolical. The article says, St. Augustine said that the devil would not have any power on you without your consent. And that's an important point there, that the devil won't have any power with you without your consent. And that's biblical. 1 Peter 5, I think it's 19. It says, 1 Peter 5, 9. It says, resist the devil, firm in your faith. James chapter 4, verse 6, it says, resist the devil and he will flee. So the Bible's not going to tell you to do something, resist the devil, in two passages, if God's not going to provide you with the grace to do it. Of course, God's going to give you the strength. If God tells you to resist the devil in the Bible, it's because God's going to give you the strength to resist the devil. As it says in Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So that's a cop-out, Eddie, when people say the devil made me do it.
Yeah, Jess, and it does require your consent. Really quick, there was a case recently that we helped father on, and he was a young actor from Hollywood, came up to see us, and this is what happened to him, Jess. He was an extra in a movie, or not even an extra. He was one of the actors in this movie, and what happened was they were doing a documentary on some kind of spiritual thing. They had a casket there. And what they did is he went into the casket. He laid down in the casket. They closed the casket on him and they started saying prayers over him. Well, he thought it was part of the show of the documentary they were doing. However, it turns out that there was, out of the 30 people that were on the set there was probably about 20 that were actual Satanists praying actual prayers over this young man. No. Jess, he said immediately when he came out, he felt there was something wrong. Called his mom right away, and they basically led him to father, and this is what happened, Jess, and you know, he came with a friend of his. This is what's really kind of saved him, is that he's a good Catholic boy. Oh, he brought a good Catholic boy with him who didn't know what was going on. But before the actual prayer session with him, they both went to confession, both boys. I said, you know what, we're in good shape, whatever happens.
Oh, yeah, these guys are locked in.
And here's somebody that said when Father came in with the Blessed Sacrament, he hated the Blessed Sacrament. He hated it. So there was an immediate effect, Jess. That doesn't happen, you know.
The demon inside of him hated it?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So he manifested.
That's what I meant. Yeah, he did manifest big time.
Wow.
So that was something that requires our consent, and this young man knew what to do about it. So thanks be to God.
See, when you again, that goes to the whole point that we've always talked about, Eddie, that 90% of the case for healing and liberation is brought by the victim, the penitent, the petitioner, and 10% by the priest. Yeah, the priest has an important role, sure. But if the person, the penitent / petitioner, is not engaged entirely with their intellect and will, they're not going to get healed. And you that was a good case, so to speak, in terms of, man, that's what you want. That type of willingness, man. I want to go to confession, totally involved. I want to get prayed over. I'm going to do whatever this priest tells me to. I'm going to live in a state of grace. I mean, that's going to be a notch on his guardian angel's belt sometime soon.
And just, the bad news was having to tell him, listen, this may not be the best, occupation choice for you, because there's a lot of things you have to compromise when you're an actor. And the good thing is that, Father has a little background in entertainment. So they talked a little bit, and he's going to be very restrictive on the things that he does acting wise. So I think it was a good thing,
Yeah, most Catholic actors that I know, Eddie, they're at this point, unless there's liberals, that don't practice their faith, they'll do anything. But the ones that want to practice their faith, absolutely, there's a restriction as to what they can do, because again, their moral conscience, properly formed, doesn't allow them. For example, there's this A-list actor. He's come out on the news a bunch of times. He's lost a lot of major roles. His name will come up to me right now, because he refuses to take his clothes off. He refuses to do nude scenes. He's a huge actor, but he's a practicing Catholic. His name will come up in the break. I'll find out, and I'll mention it for the audience, so you can say a prayer for him, Eddie. But the other thing I want to mention in regards to what St. Augustine just said here, whereas St. Augustine said the devil would not have any power on you without your consent. But just, in fact, there's a verse that really demonstrates that. It's in Genesis chapter 4, verse 7, the first book of the Bible, okay? Here's what it says, okay? Genesis 4:7. God says, if you act rightly, you will be accepted. But if not, sin lies in wait at the door. Its urge is for you, yet you can rule over it. Close quote. So notice, sin is being described by God in Genesis 4:7, kind of like a lion or a snake, just lying in wait, ready to pounce on you. But it ends where God says, yeah, even though this sin, like a lion or a snake, it's lying in wait at the door, ready to pounce on you. God says, yet you can rule it. There's that free will. Even though we're dealing with a snake or a lion, which is sin, ready to pounce on us, we have the power to resist it, because God says, and Moses writes it, that you can rule over it. You can rule over what? Over sin and temptation. Last two sentences in the article says, that being said, it is pretty clear that real demoniacs, and that's, again, a term from an energumen, or a possessed person, or somebody that's diabolically afflicted. Okay, the Bible calls them demoniacs. It is pretty clear that real demoniacs run away from the church, and obviously run away from the exorcist. And that's sad. I just know a lot of cases where people, their faith is so weak, and they're possessed, and their prayer life has been so weak, and they just been poor, bad Catholics all their life. Now they're possessed, and they've gone to maybe one or two sessions and talked to a priest, and they're saying, "Oh no, this is too hard. I'm done." What? Pray? Go to mass? No. And I've been in contact with some of these people years later. They're still possessed, and they're probably going to die in that condition, because they refuse to put in their part, which is 90% of the work. They're just saying, no. A lot of them want this, let me find a priest so he can pray over me, lay hands on me, and then I'm good. It's like a microwave. He hit the microwave for 60 seconds. Man, I'm good. I'm ready to go. It doesn't work like that. Healing somebody is not microwave, Eddie.
No, it's not instant gratification either. It's not something that happens instantaneously. If you become possessed at some point in your life, it's a long road to healing.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
Most of the times that's the case. I mean, yes, you can have God intervene and have something taken away from you that's terrible, the scourge of possession or oppression. However, most of the times you're in for a long haul, and it's going to be hard work. I mean, we talk to the Libre Cristo guys every Wednesday, Jess, and they tell us how, the protocol there is, the prayer protocol. It's not easy, Jess. It's not easy. These people have to get on there and be committed and say, okay, I'm going to do this for 30 days. I just talked to somebody the other day, had a fall, went back to the Ouija board, and guess what? You got to start over again. You don't continue the race from that point. You got to go back to the starting point, and that's what it is. That's
The last sentence says here, our purpose is the exorcist says this young exorcist from Rome. He says, our purpose is mostly to help people avoid falling into evil and free them once they've fallen into it. Let's say, though, that freeing people through our help and intervention can only happen if the person leaves a glimmer as long as we are alive and we can exercise our free will. As the saying goes, while there's breath, there's hope. So again, this young exorcist in this article that was interviewed, he says what we've been saying for the last two segments, that it requires the exercise of the person's free will. And it's just absolutely not true that you can't do anything to help yourself. That's just not true. The Bible categorically says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthened me. And that includes engaging in a prayer protocol, engaging in resisting sin, engaging in following the instructions of the priest that's treating you. You can do all things because you're a baptized Catholic Christian and Christ lives in you.
And that's what Genesis 4:7 says, Jesse. He gives us free will. The angels already had free will. They were created first. They had free will. However, because we also have free will, like it says here, the exorcist says here, as long as there's a glimmer, there's hope. And so that's what we have to be. That's what we have to rely on. Just Jesus, we trust in you. We all have to have that hope, no matter what, especially in a pandemic or in possession. That's where you need it.
Yeah, and also, Eddie, that's the whole thing about as long as the person leaves a glimmer. That's also the language of Saint Faustina. Speaking about yesterday, in the diary, Saint Faustina says that Christ can save a soul and give the soul the mercy of sanctifying grace if the soul just leaves a glimmer, opens up a glimmer to Christ. So the same word is being used actually by Saint Faustina. Jesus just needs just to crack the door open just a little bit, and he can come in and he can take care of it and heal you and set you free.
Amen. Good topic. Jess, the next topic we're going to talk about after the break, we'll begin it after the break, is an interview that Church Militant had with Kevin Wells. He's a very prolific author. We'll get into what his background is, but stay with us. Jesus 911. We're going to talk a little bit about Church Militant's interview with author Kevin Wells. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR, live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin's Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
Finding the right doctor for your obstetric and gynecological needs can be difficult. Do you want a doctor with impeccable references and ethical practices? One who is trustworthy and well-researched? Dr. Aceta is that doctor. As a faithful Catholic in the Kern County community, Dr. Aceta provides expert care guided by his Catholic teachings, focusing on the patient's needs according to his own specialty. Call Dr. Aceta for all your obstetrics and gynecological needs at 661-595-5617. Again, 661 595-5617 for quality care without compromise.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Jesus 911. If this call is not an emergency, dial 888-526-2151.
Jesus 911, we're on Soul Patrol. We're 10-8 clear for calls, Jess. We're going to get into another topic here. Church Militant had a interview with author Kevin Wells. Kevin Wells, a man with a remarkable range of experiences, Major League Baseball writer, author of a Catholic bestseller, survivor of a brain aneurysm, and interviewer of exorcists, having wrestled with and overcome evil himself, to name a few. Church Militant previously interviewed Wells when he talked about his best-selling book, The Priests We Need to Save the Church, now in its fourth printing, which lays out a blueprint of clerical heroism, calling for today's shepherds to take the narrow path of self-denial once trod by St. John Vianney, the priest saint of old, and Wells' own uncle, Monsignor Thomas Wells, who, before his shocking murder in 2000, led more than a dozen men to the priesthood and spiritually enriched the lives of thousands of Catholics. Jess, do you know anything about the Monsignor Wells?
Monsignor Thomas Wells? I remember the murder, Eddie, and it's still being investigated. I have my suspicions, but until more information comes out, I don't want to just comment on it. But I know people that know this priest, and he was a very holy priest that knew a lot of what was going on in the church.
Right.
And all of a sudden, he finds himself dead.
Yeah.
So here's what the article says. Okay, Wells agreed in this interview. He offered insights in this interview with Church Militant. And he's talking about he says a little bit about the ongoing Wuhan viral pandemic. And Wells suggests that it's unleashed a wave of intense demonic activity. That's his word. That's interesting. That this Wuhan virus said he has released an intense wave of demonic activity.
Yep.
So he's asked, you recently wrote that when the bishops began to shudder American churches, you began to consider the evil one barks as grotesquely as the chorus on that Good Friday morning, "Crucify him, crucify him." Say more about this in relation to how the faithful can navigate through Holy Week. So Kevin Wells says, an old Irish soul in this COVID-19 exiling, I've lately been imagining Jesus in those quiet moments when he faced the city of Jerusalem, fully understanding what awaited him, yet he stepped forward into the violent plan for the redemption of mankind. Kevin says, I've shared this lonely-hearted visual with my cabin-fevered children. I told them it wouldn't be a bad idea to try to spend this oddly isolating time attempting to walk upright alongside Jesus throughout this holiest of weeks. Just as we feel abandoned and in exile to some extent, it's probably wise now for us to remember how exiled Jesus felt by our sin in the garden. I'd have been right up alongside his sleeping friends, except by his grace, I might have been Judas. So as I shared with my kids, it's not a bad idea to get to get over ourselves and this temporary lack of conveniences, and to work at consoling Jesus with small sacrifices, measures of love for each other, patience, deeper prayer, and daily rosaries as we go about this indelicate but very holy week. So here Kevin Wells is just giving some good spiritual direction to his children. And again, he's very mature in his faith, so he realizes that this is a time for us to enter into more redemptive suffering as a result of what we're going through. Eddie?
Yeah, just and you know what? Whenever we do something, I want to just mention really quick. Whenever we do something that Kevin Wells is talking about here, we have to understand that there are Catholic speakers that I've heard that would say, hey, if you want to do something that intense, that's fine for you to do it. Maybe we should think twice about having our kids enter into that, just because of the age of the kids has something to do with it, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't want to be like other people who go off the deep end. You go off the deep end to the right or to the left, and you'll still be in the shark with the waters if you fall. In the waters with the shark.
Yeah.
If,
the church says there's a thing called breaking a person's innocence. I mean, there's just some people that are just too young to even understand all this, and even again the scandals of the church and stuff, political scandals, human trafficking. You don't want to bring up those topics to every single Catholic, especially those that are very young. You don't want to break their innocence yet.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what we're saying here. Just keep some sense about who follows you into some of these sacrifice and penance things. There's no problem with doing it yourself. We encourage that all the time. Church Militant asked another question. It says, you also wrote about a powerful and frightening metaphor given to you by a 93-year-old Monsignor John Esseff, renowned for his ability to read souls. You said to describe the state of seminaries, you were saying the following: I began to see the seminary as a sick womb of Holy Mother Church. Priests became deformed in the belly of the church. Or if you were a well-intentioned and good seminarian, you were going to be aborted. The guys who were real, they would just be aborted. Despite this depressing description, do you see any hope for seminaries or seminarians? Where? Why do you see hope there? What can the laity do? Kevin Wells answers it this way. He says, thankfully, seminaries are in far better shape today. Not all, but the lion's share are forming future holy priests. And speaking to faith-filled rectors in the reporting for my book, I happily discovered that most of today's rectors have shaken off the heretical rust introduced into seminaries by the misreading and misapplication of Vatican II. Re-engineering 2,000 years of truth only lasts so long. John Paul the Great, I believe, had a lot to do with stamping out the wide-sweeping heresies, spiritual diminishments, and ugly strain of homosexuality. And I remember Pope John Paul II coming to the United States to visit some of these seminaries, and I think it had a great impact on who was doing it and what they were doing.
Yeah, I agree. At least they were behaving for the weekend while he was there, at the very least.
Right.
They knew that they were doing something wrong, so they said, "Okay, let's clean it up when he gets here." Hopefully, hopefully.
That's what Kevin's saying. Kevin Wells is saying, the lion's share have straightened it out, and so we have to change.
That's good news.
Yeah.
He did the research. I haven't, so I'm gonna have to take his word for it.
Yeah, it says. Martyrs always emerge during spiritual dry days. The laity can offer enormous help by praying for future heroes of the church, but also by encouraging rectors to emphasize to hardworking, hard-studying seminarians the spiritual need for devoted prayer, committed to holy hours, daily rosaries, and embrace of mortifications. An acceptance of martyrdom should also be introduced not just as something theoretical, but also practical. This has been the seminary blueprint for many hundreds of years.
Well, that's exactly where we have to. Well, Monsignor John Esseff, who's an exorcist for Scranton, Pennsylvania, you saw what he just said right before you just read it. He admits that for a long time, right after Vatican II, maybe even during Vatican II and before, that a lot of the seminaries, he said, they were deformed. They were deforming priests in the belly of the church. Monsignor Esseff, an exorcist of 40-some-odd years, says that good seminarians and good candidates were being aborted from from seminaries. And so Monsignor Esseff talks about what he saw, probably prior to Vatican II, during Vatican II, after Vatican II. But Kevin Wells says things are a little bit better, and I'm glad to hear that because I hear the same thing from my context as well.
Jess, I sure hope this is a point in history where we're pivoting here, because I'll tell you what, Jess. And I know there's Latin Rite among us. There's Novus Ordo among us, and I love my Novus Ordo Mass. We had, there was funerals done
well.
when
it's
done
beautiful.
properly. Yes,
there you go. Done well.
It's proper. Yeah. I remember people funerals, first communions on the tongue, and so I it's difficult for me to
done properly.
Properly be critical of it, but there is a lot of issues that we need to keep going with here.
The problem is that there's the abuse is just so prevalent, Eddie. That's just
That's why.
They're just for example, I'll tell you something funny here at the Novus Ordo parish down the street from me, because I go to two parishes. I go to the Novus Ordo parish and I go to Latin Mass parish. So I'm a dual parishioner. But here, the one that's close to me, the Novus Ordo parish, again, when you have a relationship with the pastor, you can influence them to do things. So right now that the church is shut down, you know what we're having built right now in the Novus Ordo parish? Communion rails. So it'll be done in 2 weeks, and I'm behind all this. And once this is done, guess what? People are going to be shocked when the church opens up. And he says, by the way, people are all going to receive in the communion rail. I'm going to teach them how to receive Holy Communion, and I'm going to have a line for those that don't want to use the communion rail. It's going to be a line. It's going to be on the left. He goes, notice the way I just said, on the left hand side of the church. You want to go over there? You wait for me, and you could stand up, and I'll give you Holy Communion in the hand. He goes, so I'm going to pressure people. It's kind of like shaming people. People are going to say, wow, everybody's receiving on their knees in the tongue. That's beautiful. And, you're going to have two or, maybe 30 or 40 holdouts. Not me. I'm not a baby. I'm going to receive, I'm going to receive in the hand. That's my right and stuff. He goes, oh, you're going to have to wait for me after I give everybody communion in the tongue. And then I'll go over in the corner on the left side of the parish, and I'll give it to you in your hand the way you want to receive it.
And that's what one of the before this thing all came down, that's what one of the priests at a parish that I go to wanted to do. He says we're supposed to receive on the tongue, but for this pandemic, we can put it. We can allow right now to have it on the hand, and then it all went crazy, and we're not doing that. But I'm praying, Jess, that this pandemic is, because I think that's going to be the normal thing to do. You don't have to touch the communicant, Jess, if you just drop the host into their mouth, if they're kneeling and looking up at you the way we're supposed to be doing. There's no problem with that. So I think
Exactly.
I'm hoping that's what I'm praying for anyway, right?
And another good thing about the pandemic, kind of funny, is that hopefully the holding hands during the Our Father, that's abolished. The sign, even shaking hands during the sign of peace, because that's an option. That's optional. Right. It's not mandatory. Yep. That's going to be abolished. So there's some good things that could come out of this liturgically.
I think so.
To bring more reverence back to the Mass.
And that's something we need for sure. Okay, Eddie and Jess, we're talking a little bit about this interview with Kevin Wells. We'll be right back after this short break. Don't go away.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR. Live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin's Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And here's an easy way to support us by going to smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center or Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And when you log in your Amazon account and you purchase products, a portion of it will go right back in supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And it doesn't cost you a dime. I want to thank you ahead of time because that supports us year-round. May God bless you and your family. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Jesus 911. If this call is not an emergency, dial 888-526-2151.
10-8 Soul Patrol, Eddie and Jesse. Jess, we're talking about this interview with Kevin Wells. You want to take it here because we're getting a little behind.
Absolutely. Monsignor SF also said, when you're an antichrist, when you're anti-Eucharist, anti-Mary, and anti-prayer, you're of the demonic. This describes wide swaths of our population, including many politicians and, dare I say, bishops. This is from the oldest exorcist in the U.S. who just said this. Yet God-fearing people, prayerful leaders, seem to be emerging, do they not? So Kevin Wells responds, yes, martyrs have always emerged during spiritually dry days. A very strong bishop told me a few months ago that he's been led to accepting red martyrdom. He said Our Lady revealed that she wanted martyrdom for him during his holy hour. This particular bishop believes it will only be spiritual leaders with supernatural faith who will lead this post-Christian generation back to reason and God's natural law. And in these riotous, politically correct days, that's not easy. He knows he will suffer. He already is, because he is unafraid to call out sin by its name. He has given his priesthood over to Our Lady. Accordingly, he knows she demands that he suffer to the same degree as her son, or close enough anyway. Church Militant asks, so you mentioned that St. Padre Pio and St. John Vianney relied on their demonic attacks to intensify their own fasting, prayer, and attentiveness to souls. So the demons, powerless, left and never returned. This is an interesting way to look at holiness. From the evil demonic attacks came intensified holiness. Do you see this as a hopeful phenomenon for priests and ladies? So Kevin Wells says, of course, I'm reminded of what my mom used to always remind me of all those years. Return evil with good. Essentially, Mom was telling me to do something holy when confronted with an affront or indignity. St. Padre Pio and St. John Vianney knew they had to do something with the diabolical harassment in both spiritual and practical ways. If Satan was a nightly visitor, they knew they were accomplishing something holy and good, so they doubled down with the sacraments and prayer. In turn, they probably saved even more souls than if Satan had never entered their lives. Eddie?
I love that, Jess. That's a little backfire from the pit of hell. It says, you mentioned that the devil can taunt the priest, especially now in the midst of online services and outreach, by saying, you're worthless now as a priest. You're detached from your people, and they aren't praying or paying attention anyway. What can the laity do right now to strengthen their good priest resolve and perhaps bring bad priests back to God? Kevin Wells answers this way. He says, that's an easy one. Encourage them with letters, phone calls, and safe visits to the rectory to say hello. Ask how you can help him during his lonely days in the rectory. Express sincere gratitude for their heroic work to tend to his isolated flock in unique ways. Priests didn't become priests to sit behind a camera. This work is indelicate and burdensome for them. Holy priests like Pio and Vianney will always be attacked by Satan because of their incessant work at anchoring souls to God. And so really, just we have to think about how are we doing this? Are we taking, a check to the rectory and checking in with the priests? Are we dropping these things off? Are we calling them safe distances, etc., to catch up on things that they might need? This is something that Kevin is saying needs to be done. He says, as far as bringing lukewarm priests back, we must pray every day for them. I spend more time in prayer for timid or reluctantly holy priests than any other priest. Since the release of my book, The Priest We Need to Save the Church, many dozens of priests and even bishops have reached out to share with me that my encouraging words of holiness and heroism have reshaped and even re-engineered their entire priesthood. God's redemptive work, channeled through a poor, old, sinful sports writer, has been quite remarkable to me.
Church Militant asks, your book was published before the coronavirus. Do you think its message is still relevant? Kevin Wells says, yes, it's my firm belief that a priest must wake up each morning wanting to die for both the church and for his flock. It's the burden of his identity. He is Jesus Christ, the mediator who was crucified. As a progressive society, we've mostly derailed ourselves. I believe that the holy work of the bold and heroic priest will help to convert the world. When his flock recognizes in him a willingness to die for them, conversion naturally unfolds.
Yeah, it says the next question they asked him is, during an online Palm Sunday liturgy, a priest stationed in Ohio shared this reference from the breviary for Holy Week. He says, liars are come roundabout. They have fallen upon me with scourges. I wonder if you can comment on this quotation in light of your 2009 hospital experiences when you wrestled with the demon. Kevin says, Satan's work does seem to have a primitive simplicity. He divides the soul from God and works to destroy it through his duplicity. And when the soul is in its most vulnerable state, the scale and ferocity of his work intensify. He says that the secular zeitgeist, is that how you say that? Zeitgeist?
Yeah,
Zeitgeist is where we live now. It is on altars, in grocery stores, television studios, schools, the Capitol building. It's everywhere. Again, the evil one marinates in places where God is absent.
That's a powerful quote there.
Yeah, I love that quote.
Yeah, that's what Liber Christo, they say, angels come where they are asked, demons come where they're not resisted. That's the Liber Christo teaching. I'll say it again. Angels come where they are asked. Demons come where they're not resisted. That's the same thing that Kevin Wells is saying here.
Yeah, he said, when I was in the hospital dying from a brain hemorrhage, he seemed to take over my room. The chaplain, Father William Spacek, used to walk into the lengthening shadows of my neuro ICU room as many as 3 times a day to hold the Eucharist above my head. He told my wife demonic forces had come into my room. But as is often the case, a holy priest chased away all doubt, fear, and oppressions with his anointing. I was healed. It is a remarkable story of what unfolded as the priest anointed me. This priest often cries when retelling the supernatural that poured into the room. That's amazing. And as an old boxer and weightlifter, crying is kind of a wimpy thing for him to do. So it had to be pretty cool. And that's what he's talking about. This priest, old boxer, Jess, and weightlifter, cries when he recounts what happened in Kevin Wells' room. That's beautiful.
Wow. The next question they ask him, speaking of boxing, the Ohio priest didn't pull any punches when he also talked about a silent yet blaring revolution around us, the destruction going on. He said to think of the situation as a combination between George Orwell's 1984 in regards to unprecedented state intervention and fairy tale, The Emperor's New Clothes, that is, believing the lies and stories in the propaganda media. Do you think this is a realistic assessment of what's going on? Kevin Wells says, I think there are always lies and disorders where God is absent. The secular zeitgeist is where we live now. It's on the altars in grocery stores, television studios, schools, Capitol building. It's everywhere. Again, the evil one marinates in places where God is absent. So he spins lies that spiral in wickedly harmful directions. Setting COVID-19 analysis aside, look at abortion. I do believe the possible legal overturning of the murder of the innocent, of the most innocent, the preeminent secular sacrament is driving much of today's misdirection, lies, and vitriol. Cowardice and a seeming lack of a supernatural outlook from clergy isn't helping in a world that agonizes for true shepherds. Eddie?
This is the next question. It says, the priest also said 911 didn't work. Climate change was a great flop. This is the big one. Urging the faithful to make the best of Holy Week and not to waste a grace. What can you say to this advice in general or in relation to your escape from the evil one in the hospital room? Kevin replies, repeated warnings from Our Lady about turning our faces back to her son at La Salette, Fatima, Akita, and even Garabandal, which Padre Pio and John Paul the Great and Mother Teresa seem to support, aren't being heeded. Few pray the daily rosary. How many are committed to the daily penances she requested? Are we in sackcloth today? Or has Netflix and pornography viewership skyrocketed since the onset of COVID-19? I think Our Lady has done a pretty good job at trying to hold God as a just judge back. We've displayed through our re-engineering of marriage, gender, life, abortion at 9 months, euthanasia, that we enjoy the idea that we can play God. This doesn't seem to bode well for us. I've spoken with a handful of priests the past few days who believe these chastising days that may not be ending soon. As far as this Holy Week, as it relates to the aforementioned, I believe it is time to intensify our pleading to God's mercy through prayer, fasting, and sacrifice. And if we find that we haven't come into deeper measures of prayer during this Holy Week, this strange week of exile, then I think it would be wise that we reevaluate our lives. We're simply not in the same game. If we find ourselves repeatedly grabbing the remote to tune into CNN, Fox, or talk shows, or to hear the latest on the virus, we're simply wasting this desert grace. Our spouses, children, and the Catholic Church needs us in prayer and penance now.
The last thing Kevin Wells says is this: I strongly believe we should be praying for all of our priests now, holy priests, fledgling priests, bachelor priests, and suffering priests. When the virus finally passes, priests will quickly become overwhelmed, and it will be during this time that I believe what Pope Benedict said: our church will be smaller, but stronger and holier. And when that happens, some of these overwhelmed priests will begin to resemble saints. Other priests, I imagine, will look exactly the same. The wheat will begin to be separated from the chaff. It will be exposed for all to see. Well, from his lips to God's ears. I like the way he ended that article, Eddie.
Yeah, and it's beautiful to think that we have the option. Right now is the time, when the sky opens, the trumpets blare, that's not the time to say, maybe I should have done this differently. Now's the time. Now's the time to be penance, do penance for the church, for us and the church.
Yeah. And remember, do your spiritual communion prayer every morning. Start your day off uniting yourself with Jesus Christ in the Eucharist every morning spiritually. At night, before you go to bed, do an examination of conscience and unite yourself to the sacrament of confession by doing an act of contrition. So in the morning, unite yourself to the sacrament of the Eucharist. At night, unite yourself in the act of contrition and an examination of conscience to the sacrament of confession. This way, again, though you can't receive these sacramentally, you're receiving both of these sacraments spiritually every single day as you start your day and as you end your day.
Yes, we are about 6 weeks into this pandemic. And if you're not thinking, man, I need to get to confession, and you're used to going to confession every 6 months, we still need to work on you. So tune in to Jesus 911 the rest of the week. Gary Machuda. Gary Machuda's on next with Hands on Apologetics. I'm not sure who the guest is, but he usually has a good one. So God bless you. Remember the war cry of Jesus 911 is Quis ut Deus, who's like unto God. God bless you. Jess?
Viva Cristo Rey.
Amen, brother.
See you next time.
Saint Faustina's Prayer for Priests. O my Jesus, I beg thee on behalf of the whole Church, grant it love and the light of thy Spirit, and give power to the words of priests, so that hardened hearts might be brought to repentance and return to thee, O Lord. Lord, give us holy priests, Thou thyself maintain them in holiness. O divine and great High Priest, may the power of thy mercy accompany them everywhere, and protect them from the devil's traps and snares, which are continually being set for the souls of priests. May the power of thy mercy, O Lord, shatter and bring to naught all that might tarnish the sanctity of priests. For thou canst do all things. Amen. Virgin most powerful, pray for us.